What if I told you that the difference between being broke at 65 and being wealthy enough to retire comfortably isn't about how much money you make, but about mastering just a handful of principles that most people completely ignore? What if the secrets to building real wealth aren't actually secrets at all, but simple strategies that anyone can learn, yet somehow 99% of people never figure them out? My name is Nick, and I've spent years studying why some people build generational wealth while others blow through millions and end up broke. The answer isn't what you think, and by the end of this video, you'll understand the psychological traps that keep most people poor, the critical difference between getting rich and staying rich, and why your neighbor who drives a luxury car might actually be broke while the person next to them in the 10-year-old Honda could be sitting on millions. If you're serious about understanding how money really works and want to escape the financial hamster wheel that keeps most people running in circles, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Trust me, what I'm about to share will completely change how you think about wealth. Now, before we dive into the specific strategies and mindset shifts, let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. When was the last time you made a financial decision based on fear of missing out? Maybe you bought a stock because everyone was talking about it, or perhaps you invested in something risky because you heard someone made a fortune doing the same thing. If you're being honest, it was probably more recent than you'd like to admit. Here's the thing that separates wealthy people from everyone else. They've mastered the single most important financial skill that nobody talks about. It's not budgeting, it's not investing, and it's definitely not picking winning stocks. It's the ability to resist FOMO, the fear of missing out. This might sound simple, but it's actually the hardest thing most people will ever learn to do with money. Think about it this way. Every financial disaster in history, from the Dutch tulip mania to the dot-com bubble to the housing crisis, happened because millions of otherwise intelligent people couldn't resist the fear of missing out on easy money. They saw other people getting rich and threw caution to the wind, often losing everything in the process. The wealthy, on the other hand, have learned to be comfortable with missing out on the latest hot investment trend because they understand something most people don't. The real secret to building wealth isn't about finding the next big thing or being brilliant with your investments. It's about being patient enough to let compound interest work its magic over decades, not months or years. Most people think wealth building should feel exciting, like they're constantly making smart moves and beating the market, but the reality is much more boring than that. Warren Buffett, one of the richest people in the world, made 99% of his wealth after age 60. Let that sink in for a moment. The most successful investor in history didn't get rich by being young and aggressive. He got wealthy by staying in the game long enough for compound interest to do what it does best, create exponential growth over time. This brings us to a critical distinction that most people completely misunderstand. Getting rich and staying rich require completely different skill sets, and most people who achieve one fail spectacularly at the other. Getting rich requires boldness, optimism, and the willingness to take calculated risks. You need to believe in your ideas, bet on yourself, and push forward even when others doubt you. But staying rich, that's an entirely different game. Staying rich requires humility, a healthy dose of paranoia, and obsessive risk management. You need to assume that what made you wealthy might not work forever, that markets can turn against you, and that overconfidence can destroy decades of progress in a matter of months. The people who master both skills, like Buffett and Bill Gates, understand that audacity and caution aren't opposites. They're complementary forces that must be balanced carefully. They take big swings when the odds are in their favor, but they always cap their downside so they can survive long enough for the compound interest to work. This is where most people go wrong. They either play it so safe that inflation eats away their purchasing power, or they take such massive risks that one bad decision wipes out everything they've built. The wealthy have learned to find the sweet spot between these extremes. Now, let's talk about something that might bruise your ego a little bit. If you're constantly trying to beat the market, pick winning stocks, or time your investments perfectly, you're probably making your financial situation worse, not better. The data on this is crystal clear, even though it goes against everything our culture teaches us about success. Index funds, those boring investments that simply track the entire market, outperform the vast majority of professional money managers over long periods. Why? Because a small number of stocks create most of the market's returns, and when you own an index fund, you automatically own those winners without having to guess which companies they'll be. Here's the part that really stings for people who think they're smart enough to beat the system. Effort actually hurts your investment results. The more you tinker with your portfolio, trade in and out of positions, and try to be clever with your money, the worse your returns typically become. It turns out that being average for an above average period of time is far more profitable than trying to be brilliant for short bursts. But there's a catch, and this is where patience becomes absolutely crucial. Index funds may underperform for long stretches, sometimes years or even decades. During these periods, you'll watch other people seemingly get rich quick with individual stocks, cryptocurrency, or whatever the hot investment trend happens to be. This is when most people abandon their strategy and chase the latest shiny object. The wealthy, however, understand that there are no guarantees in investing, and they're comfortable with the possibility that their approach might look foolish in the short term. They know that patience isn't just a virtue in investing, it's the difference between building lasting wealth and constantly starting over. This brings us to a crucial distinction that most people completely miss, the difference between being rich and being wealthy. These terms get thrown around interchangeably, but they represent fundamentally different financial realities. Being rich means you can pay your bills and live comfortably. You might have a nice house, drive a decent car, and take vacations without worrying about money. But being wealthy, that's something entirely different. Wealth is about having independence, autonomy, and the freedom to make choices based on what you want, not what you can afford. Here's the counterintuitive part that trips up most people. Real wealth is invisible. It's the money you don't spend, not the stuff you buy with it. The person driving the flashy sports car might be rich, but they're probably not wealthy. The wealthy person is more likely to be driving something reliable and unremarkable while quietly accumulating assets that provide options and freedom. True wealth isn't about possessions. It's about possibilities. It's about being able to wake up in the morning and say, I can do whatever I want today, not because you have unlimited money, but because you have enough to make choices based on your values rather than your financial constraints. This is where most people's relationship with money goes completely off the rails. Instead of using money as a tool for independence, they use it as a scoreboard for status. They get trapped in what I call the status game, constantly competing with others to signal their success through their purchases. The problem with the status game is that it's designed to be unwinnable. There will always be someone with a bigger house, a more expensive car, or a more luxurious lifestyle. When you're playing for appearances rather than independence, you end up in a perpetual state of dissatisfaction, always chasing the next purchase that will finally prove your worth. The wealthy understand that money is a tool for buying something far more valuable than any luxury item, the ability to control your time. When someone tells you they can't afford something, they're rarely talking about money. They're talking about the trade-offs they'd have to make, the opportunities they'd have to give up, and the freedom they'd have to sacrifice. This is why the relationship between money and happiness is so much more complicated than most people realize. Studies consistently show that money does buy happiness, but only up to a point. That point isn't some arbitrary dollar amount, though. It's the point where you have enough to stop making financial decisions based on fear and start making them based on choice. Here's what's fascinating about human psychology. We're terrible at predicting what will actually make us happy. We think the bigger house, the luxury car, or the designer clothes will provide lasting satisfaction. But what actually makes us happy is having options, having security, and having the freedom to pursue what matters to us without constantly worrying about money. The best return you can get on your money isn't 10% annually or even 20%. It's the ability to wake up in the morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. Not because you have unlimited wealth, but because you've structured your finances in a way that gives you choices rather than constraints. This brings us to one of the most important distinctions in personal finance, and it's something that trips up even smart people. There's a massive difference between making good financial decisions and making good life decisions, and sometimes these two things are completely at odds with each other. For example, paying off your mortgage early might be a terrible financial decision if you could earn higher returns investing that money elsewhere, but it might be a fantastic life decision if having a paid off home gives you peace of mind and the security to take risks in other areas of your life. The wealthy understand this distinction and make decisions based on what serves their overall well-being, not just their net worth. Your house isn't really an investment, despite what real estate agents might tell you. It's a container for your life. What matters isn't the financial value of that container, but the quality of the life you build inside it. If paying off your mortgage allows you to sleep better at night and pursue opportunities you otherwise wouldn't take, then it's worth far more than the mathematical opportunity cost. This is where personal finance gets truly personal. Your risk tolerance, your goals, and your values are unique to you, and what makes sense for someone else might be completely wrong for your situation. The wealthy understand this and resist the temptation to copy other people's financial strategies without understanding the context behind them. Speaking of context, let's talk about something that makes most people uncomfortable: the role of luck in financial success. We live in a culture that loves to believe success is purely the result of hard work, smart decisions, and personal responsibility. But the truth is far more nuanced than that. Luck matters more than most of us want to admit. Where you were born, when you were born, who your parents were, and what opportunities came your way had enormous influence on your financial trajectory. This doesn't diminish the importance of good decisions and hard work, but it should inject a healthy dose of humility into how we think about success and failure. The person buying lottery tickets at the gas station isn't necessarily making a decision. They might be making what seems like a stupid financial decision, but it's a rational choice given their circumstances. When you have very little money and few opportunities to improve your situation through traditional means, buying hope for $2 might actually make perfect sense. It's not stupidity, it's desperation dressed up as optimism. Understanding this perspective is crucial because it helps you avoid one of the most dangerous traps in personal finance: judging other people's financial decisions without understanding their constraints. The wealthy recognize that everyone is playing a different game with different rules, different starting points, and different definitions of success. This is why comparing your financial progress to others is not just pointless, it's actively harmful to your wealth building efforts. When you see someone posting about their investment gains on social media, you're seeing a highlight reel, not the full story. You don't know their starting point, their risk tolerance, their financial obligations, or the losses they're not talking about. The most successful investors I know rarely talk about their returns because they understand that bragging about short-term gains is often a precursor to long-term losses. When you start believing your own hype, you start taking bigger risks, making more aggressive bets, and eventually you give back all your gains and then some. This brings us to another crucial insight about building lasting wealth. Your family's financial habits during your childhood probably shaped your money mindset more than any book, course, or financial advisor ever will. The attitudes and behaviors you learned before you were old enough to question money likely still influence every financial decision you make today. People who grew up during economic hardship often develop a deep appreciation for frugality and saving that serves them well throughout their lives. They understand that financial security isn't guaranteed, and that building a buffer against uncertainty isn't just smart, it's essential for peace of mind. On the other hand, people who grew up in financially unstable households sometimes develop either an obsessive need to hoard money or a tendency to spend impulsively when they have it. Neither extreme is healthy, but understanding where these tendencies come from can help you make more conscious choices about money. The point isn't to blame your upbringing for your financial situation, but rather to recognize that your relationship with money was shaped by factors beyond your control. Once you understand these influences, you can start making deliberate choices about which habits to keep and which ones to change. Here's something that might surprise you. Many of the wealthiest people I know still have the spending habits they developed when they had very little money. They drive older cars, live in modest homes, and think twice before making any significant purchase. This isn't because they're cheap or don't know how to enjoy money. It's because they understand that the habits that help them build wealth are the same habits that will help them keep it. The relationship between frugality and wealth isn't what most people think it is. Wealthy people aren't frugal because they have to be. They're wealthy because they choose to be frugal in areas that don't matter to them, so they can be extravagant in areas that do. They might drive a 10-year-old car but spend thousands on experiences with their family. They might live in a modest home but invest heavily in their education and personal development. This selective approach to spending is one of the most important skills you can develop for building lasting wealth. It requires you to be honest about what actually brings value to your life versus what you think should bring value based on social expectations. Most people do this backwards. They spend money on things that are visible to others and skimp on things that actually improve their quality of life. They'll finance a luxury car to look successful, but refuse to pay for a house cleaner that would give them hours of their life back every week. They'll buy expensive clothes to make a good impression, but won't invest in their health or education. The wealthy flip this equation. They're willing to look ordinary to outsiders if it means having extraordinary freedom and opportunities in their private lives. They understand that true luxury isn't about impressing other people. It's about having the resources to live according to your own values and priorities. This is why you'll often find that the most financially secure people you know aren't the ones bragging about their latest investment wins on social media. They're the ones quietly living below their means, maxing out their retirement accounts, and sleeping well at night because they're not constantly stressed about money. But here's where things get really interesting, and this might hurt a little if you're someone who prides themselves on being a savvy investor. The data shows that your effort to be clever with your investments is probably making you poorer, not richer. I know this goes against everything we're taught about success in America, but stick with me on this one. When researchers track the performance of individual investors versus simple index funds, the results are almost embarrassing. The average investor earns significantly less than the market average, not because they're bad at picking stocks, but because they can't help themselves from buying high and selling low. They get excited when prices are rising and panic when prices are falling, which is literally the opposite of what successful investing requires. Whereas funds, on the other hand, are boring in the best possible way. They don't try to be clever or beat the market. They simply own a tiny piece of every company in the stock market, which means you automatically own the winners without having to guess which companies they'll be. It's like showing up to a casino where you're guaranteed to win, as long as you're willing to wait long enough for the house edge to work in your favor. The beautiful thing about index funds is that they solve the hardest problem in investing. You don't have to be right about anything specific. You just have to be right about one thing: that human beings will continue to solve problems, create value, and build businesses over the long term. If you believe that, then index funds will eventually make you wealthy. If you don't believe that, then you probably shouldn't be investing in anything. I get, but here's the catch that trips up most people. And it's why patience isn't just important in investing. It's literally the difference between success and failure. Index funds don't go up every year. Sometimes they go down for years at a time. Sometimes they go down by 50% or more. During these periods, you'll watch your account balance shrink while your neighbor brags about making money trading cryptocurrency or individual stocks. This is when most people give up and chase the next hot investment, completely sabotaging decades of potential wealth building. The wealthy understand something that most people never figure out. Building lasting wealth isn't about being brilliant. It's about being boring and consistent for an above average period of time. They don't save money to buy things, they save money to buy freedom. They don't compare their returns to day traders on social media because they're playing a completely different game with different rules and different timelines. Remember, luck matters more than we want to admit, but discipline matters more than luck ever will. Your childhood shaped your money mindset, but your choices today shape your financial future. Don't chase other people's investment returns, don't play status games you can't win, and don't mistake being rich for being wealthy. The path to true wealth is surprisingly simple. Resist FOMO, embrace boring investments, live below your means, and let compound interest work its magic over decades. It's not sexy, it won't make for exciting social media posts, and your friends probably won't understand why you drive that 10-year-old Honda. But 20 years from now, when you wake up and can honestly say you can do whatever you want that day, you'll realize that freedom was worth every sacrifice. If this video changed how you think about money, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments which of these principles resonated most with you. Because building wealth isn't just about the money, it's about building the life you actually want to live.